In this video, we're going to do a complete analysis of the harmonies and of the non-chord tones of this Bach Chorale number 22 in E flat. And because it's in the key of E flat, I'm going to go ahead and make myself a chart of the chords in the key of E flat so that I have a nice reference when I go through and analyze these harmonies. So there's the E flat scale. Here are the chords. And for the 5 chord, I'm actually going to build that up to the 7th, because we're seeing now that composers do like to build the 5 chords up to the 7th. That's rather common. And we have in the key of E flat, 1, 2 is minor, 3 is minor. Of course, this is in a major key. 4 is major, 5, 7 is the dominant 7th, and the 6th chord, and the 7 diminished chord. So those will be my chords, and I'll use that as a reference. I'm going to go ahead and play the piece so that you get a chance to see what it sounds like first. Now I've already determined that this piece is in the key of E flat. I see the 3 flats on the key signature. I see the E flat bass note, and I see at the very end an E flat at the very bottom, the lowest pitch of the bass. That's quite a low pitch there too for a bass singer. And then an E flat here in the soprano. So everything is pointing to the key of E flat, this major key. And the first chord that I see is E flat, G, and B flat. So I'm seeing the pitches that are all in the 1 chord. So I'll go ahead and put a Roman numeral 1. The next thing I see here are B flat, D, and F. I can always put that on a piece of scrap paper and get those notes together as close as possible. And the pitches I'm seeing there are notes of the 5 chord. I see a pitch comes in here a little bit on the, a little later on the second half of the second beat. I'm going to go ahead and circle that, and that's an A flat. But if I look at the chord chart that I made and look at the 5 chord, those notes are actually B flat, D, F, and A flat, because I built the chord up to the 7th. So what I'm seeing here is the entrance of the 7th of the chord. So I'm just going to label that right there to indicate that the 7th came in at that point. Next, I have a C, an E flat, and a G. And from the chart, I can see that's a 6 chord. And then I have a B flat, a D, and an F. And again, from the chart, I can see that that's a 5 chord. But take note that the pitch that I'm seeing in the bass at this point, this is the B flat, D, F chord. The pitch I'm seeing in the bass is the D. That's the 3rd of the chord. Therefore, I need to write the inversion symbol that indicates that I know that's first inversion. It might be actually kind of interesting at this point just to double check a few things that we think we already know about these chords, like, for example, what's doubled in each chord. In the 1st chord, I see that the E flat and the E flat has been doubled. That's good. That's what we learned, that the root tone should be doubled. In the 5 chord, B flat and the B flat, the root tone has been doubled. In the 6th chord, the C and the C has been doubled. Okay, the root tone. What about the first inversion chord? B flat, D, F. Here's the F. Looks like the F has been doubled. F and F. So the soprano has been doubled, just as we learned about. So this is all predictable. Next thing I see here is an E flat, G, and a B flat. That's back to my 1 chord. So I'll go ahead and label that 1. I see some pitches here that are off the beat, but I'm going to skip that for a minute and go on to this chord. Sometimes I will better be able to analyze things if I just get an idea of what my harmonic context is. E flat, G, B flat, right? We're seeing that quite a lot of that, right? E flat, G, B flat. and that's the 1 chord again. But notice that the lowest pitch here is G, which means I need to indicate that this is in first inversion. Interestingly, Bach doubles not the soprano in this chord, but the bass. And we know that that is a possible alternate doubling when we have a chord that's in first inversion. Often I tell you to try to double the soprano with an inner voice, because that'll avoid lots of part writing errors. And here Bach has decided that he's going to double the bass. And I'm going to circle this note. The reason I'm circling those notes is because they don't seem to fit my analysis, right? I mean, we've got E flat, G, and B flat for both of these chords. That's an A flat, that's an F. Well, let's go ahead and revert to our non-chord tone vocabulary. And let's do this one first. We've got a non-chord tone that's been introduced by step, and then it is left by step in the same direction. So we should label that. That will be a passing tone. In this voice, we have a chord tone followed by a non-chord tone, approached by step, and left by step in the same direction. Again, we're going to label this as a passing tone. So this is really important whenever you're analyzing music and you're seeing pitches that don't fit in the harmony. The non-chord tones, you need to circle them and you need to label them, because everything in the music should be accounted for in your analysis. All right, let's take a look at this. This is a B flat, an F, an E flat, and an A flat. Now everything looks like a chord there, but that doesn't fit anything on the chart in terms of the key of B flat, but it's close. In other words, B flat, E flat, F, A flat. It's close to this, isn't it? The 5 chord, B flat, D, F, A flat. But except for that E flat at that moment, seems like it's a non-chord tone. That's interesting because that's on a strong beat. It's not coming in after the beat, it's coming in right on the beat. And at this point in time, we only know a couple of strong beat dissonances. We know the appoggiatura and we know the suspension. So let's talk about that non-chord tone. Let's first of all notice that it didn't just get introduced here, it got introduced here in the previous chord. Whenever a non-chord tone comes in on the previous chord, and when, of course, when it first appears, it appears as a chord tone, we call that a preparation. So I'm going to go ahead and circle this and label it as P. And of course, the P equals preparation. And what do you call it when a preparation holds into the next chord and becomes a non-chord tone? We call that a suspension. So S equals suspension. And we know what a suspension is supposed to do. It can't just stay there. A suspension needs to resolve. And the way a suspension resolves is stepwise down. And look, that's exactly what Bach does. That's the D we were looking for in the chord. He just delayed its entrance. It's as if one of the voices enjoyed singing her notes so much, that E flat, that even when the chord changed, she kept singing her note. And then maybe the alto had to kind of, wake her up and say, hey, you've got to move to your note that's in the chord. And then finally she does. She goes down. Of course, that's just one way of thinking of a suspension. And it's a beautiful musical effect. It actually puts one of the voices out of sync with the motion of the other voices. So there's my resolution. R equals resolution. So when I indicate what this chord is, I'm going to go ahead and say this is a 5/7 chord, except it's got in the interval of a third above the bass, from B flat to E flat is not a third, a fourth. B flat, C, D, E flat is a fourth, and then the fourth resolves to the third at that point. And I can even underneath just put in parentheses that I know that that's a suspension. Now there's something else in here. He's decorating the suspension a little bit with another voice. So I'm going to circle that note because that really doesn't fit in the chord either, that E flat. But that one's actually a little bit easier to analyze. There's the chord tone. There's the non-chord tone, and it's stepped into it, and then it is stepped out of it in the opposite direction, returning to the original tone. And you may remember that that's called a neighbor tone. I'll put that right here. Neighbor tone. Our first cadence, right here, and that is, of course, a very recognizable chord, the E flat, G, B flat, that we've seen several times. Very nice low note for my bass, probably the extreme of its register. What kind of a cadence is this? Well, it's 5 going to a 1, so it is an authentic cadence, which I'll write here. Is it a perfect authentic cadence or an imperfect authentic cadence? Well, you might recall, for it to be a perfect authentic cadence, that has to be in root position, which it is. This has to be in root position, which it is. And the melody has to be the root tone of the chord, which it is not. Notice the melody is not E flat, it's G. Therefore, we have to say that this is an imperfect authentic cadence. All right, let's continue. This is B flat, D, F. You can see that on the chart. That's the 5 chord without the 7th. And it has not the root tone, not the B flat in the bass, but the D, right? B flat, D, F. The D is in the bass. Therefore, we must indicate that this is in first inversion. We're getting very used to seeing this chord, the E flat, G, B flat. That's just the 1 chord again. What about this one? C, E flat, A flat. Juggle those notes around, find it on the chart, and I think you'll see it as the 4 chord, A flat, C, E flat, 4. Of course, the note that Bach puts in the bass is not A flat, but C. That's the 3rd, so I'm going to have to indicate it as 4, 6. Kind of interesting. Look, again, he didn't double the soprano in this chord, he doubled the bass. And he introduced a pitch here, which does not seem to fit, right? That's a D, and there's no D in the chord. But I think you can see that pretty clearly what that is now. We're getting used to seeing that. We're going to label that as a passing tone. This chord, good old E flat, G, B flat again. That's the 1 chord in root position. The soprano and the alto now are moving to notes that are not part of the chord. I'll circle them both. They are both being introduced in stepwise motion and left in stepwise motion. So this is what I would call a double passing tone. A flat, C, E flat, back to this chord with the A flat on the bass. E flat, G, B flat, back to the 1 chord, but not with E flat in the bass, with G in the bass. That's the 3rd. Oh, we're getting used to seeing that quite a bit, aren't we? We're seeing a non that doesn't fit in the chord, introduced on a weak part of a beat, stepwise, left stepwise, same direction. That's a passing tone. And then we see something similar to what we saw up here is B flat, E flat, and F. This is actually moving into A flat, isn't it? So the closest we're going to see to that is the 5 chord, except the E flat should have been a D, which comes in a little bit later. Again, it seems as though one of the voices is delayed. The alto decided she would keep singing her note even though the chord changed. So we need to indicate the fact that this pitch is 4 above. Actually it's not 4, it's 11, but we always reduce to simple intervals when we're indicating figured bass symbols. So that's a 4 that is resolving to a 3. We need to circle it to indicate that it is a non-chord tone. And let's just check. The non-chord tone is on a strong part of a beat. It is introduced on the previous chord, the same pitch, in which it is actually a chord tone and not a dissonance. We know the name for that is preparation. We know the name for this is suspension. And with any luck, we'll get a resolution where this steps down into the chord tone, and it's right there. That's how you know you have a suspension. It's prepared. Same pitch, previous chord. That voice keeps singing the wrong note. That's the suspension. That's a non-chord tone dissonance. And then finally resolves to the correct note. Now at this point, Bach brings in the A flat, which we know this chord, if you built it to the 7th, B flat, D, F, would be A flat. That's a chord tone, but that is not. This doesn't fit into the chord, so I'm going to circle that. It goes, first of all, I'll indicate that the 7th entered at that point. And I'll also indicate that this non-chord tone has been introduced stepwise and then reversed direction, so we know that's a neighbor tone. And then finally, we have the very familiar 1 chord. So let's take a look at the cadence. 5 going to 1. We know that's an authentic cadence. And let's see, it's root position, and it is root position. And look, the tonic pitch is actually there. It's in the soprano. So this is in fact a perfect authentic cadence. So there is our analysis. I'm going to just sort of position it here so you can see the whole thing. And then I think it would be a good idea to listen to this piece again now that you know the chord analysis. Maybe that whole idea of a chord analysis is to gain an understanding of what the composer may have been thinking, how the logic works in a piece. And I think musicians get, they get to anticipate. This is what Schoenberg said. You get to anticipate the pleasure that you're going to get from listening to a piece of music by understanding it. And maybe even as a performer, you get a chance to interpret it with a little bit better knowledge. So let's give it a listen.